Hey Shaheen, is it wrong to be vegan?
I don't know, Ari.
So this channel, called Goodful, released a video recently entitled, "Is it wrong to be vegan?" As if that title wasn't enough to tell you that this video is just clickbait to piss off vegans and get them to watch, or encourage those anti-vegans to also come and watch it. Let's start by saying I've never seen this channel before. It came up as a recommendation because I watch vegan content, so naturally I was curious. After watching it though, I was so dumbfounded by the illogical, fake happy arrogance of these people that I decided to make a YouTube channel and respond.
We're no moral authority.
According to Joseph Poor, air-transported fruit and veggies can create more greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram than poultry.
So they're quoting from a paper authored by Joseph Poole. They claim that air-transported fruit and veggies create more greenhouse gas emissions than meat products through air transport. The thing to realise though is that the vast majority of animals and animal feed is shipped around the world, so it's a false equivalency. Now, you might say, well, they just got a bad source, or perhaps the data was wrong, but if you look up Joseph Poole online, you will find a paper co-authored by him titled "Reducing Food's Environmental Impact Through Producers and Consumers," which states that for many products, impacts are skewed by producers with particularly high impacts. This creates opportunities for targeted mitigation, making an immense problem more manageable. For example, for beef originating from beef herds, the highest impact 25% of producers represent 56% of beef herds' global greenhouse gas emissions and 61% of the land use, an estimated 1.3 billion metric tons of CO2 and 950 million hectares of land, primarily pasture. Across all products, 25% of producers contribute on average 53% of each product's environmental impact. For scarcity-weighted freshwater withdrawals, the skew is particularly pronounced, producing just 5% of the world's food calories created roughly 40% of the environmental burden. Now, I cannot say for sure that this is a source they're using, but it does show that the scientist they are claiming is in support of meat is actually claiming the opposite. By talking about air travel and the emissions produced there, they're lying by omission due to the vast majority of foodstuffs being transported by sea. Only products with short shelf lives are moved via plane, which, to be totally honest, from what I understand, is mainly short shelf life plant foods, but it is negligible in comparison. Further to this, completely ending their point, Peel goes on to say, in particular, the impacts of animal products can markedly exceed those of vegetable substitutes, to such a degree that meat, aquaculture, eggs and dairy use around 83% of the world's farmland and contribute 56 to 58% of food's different emissions, despite providing only 37% of our protein and 18% of our calories. Can animal products be produced with sufficiently low impacts to redress this vast imbalance, or will reducing animal product consumption deliver greater environmental benefits? By using the air transport emissions in this way, they are purposefully misleading their audience. I would go as far to say they attempt to say air transport as quickly as possible to make people focus on the end of the sentence, thereby avoiding this obvious flaw in their logic. I can't prove it, but listen to how they deliver the line and see what you think.
Air-transported fruit and veggies can create more greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram.
Study in Italy where they looked at omnivores, vegans, and vegetarians. And randomly, 2 vegans in that study had the highest environmental impact. It was because these vegans were eating exclusively fruit. And
2 vegans had the most impact due to their fruitarian dietary patterns, due to the emissions caused through air travel. This is not common practice in vegans. Most will eat a wide variety of foods. A few seconds later, they admit that overall omnivores create more of an environmental impact.
But that same study, if you look at all 153 people overall, yes, meat eaters had a bigger environmental impact.
This is well known. I don't need to go into detail here. It just seems like they're nitpicking to me, so let's move on.
While livestock does have an impact on carbon emissions, it is not the leading source of environmental impacts. By far, the use of fossil fuels is the leading source of such emissions.
Next point is that nothing compares to fossil fuels in terms of environmental impact. This is a debated point, but that is not what I want to focus on here. I want this video to be as short as possible, because I'm pretty sure I could go on for hours, to be honest.
We did an environmental footprint calculator, and the vegan actually, she had the highest environmental footprint because she flew cross country a lot.
An anecdote about a vegan who flies around a lot, not explaining if it's for work or pleasure, made this vegan have the highest environmental impact out of anyone in the group who were tested. This is pointless, as you had just admitted that overall omnivores had the worst environmental impact. Should it not be that, given her constant travelling, by being vegan she's doing the best she can? I don't know about you, but cycling to Hong Kong for business is not exactly something I would consider. That being said, I do agree that cutting down on our dependency on fossil fuels is important for everyone, but by going vegan, you are going to have an easier time making an initial dent in your ecological impact. They then go on to admit that doing something is better than nothing, so why make it sound like going vegan is a grey area in terms of ecological impact?
So we're all hypocrites. So we're all hypocrites. So we're all hypocrites. So we're all hypocrites.
A group of scientists recommends a largely plant-based diet, which is purported to be able to feed 10 billion people by 2050, allows small and occasional allowances for meat.
Next, we have a study with no name or authors which claims that a plant-based diet can feed 10 billion people by 2050, making small allowances for meat. The question I have to ask here is simply why. You clearly know from this so far that meat has a terrible impact on the planet, and most likely you realise that you don't need it to survive, so why waste resources by continuing this practice?
So we're all hypocrites.
Plus, it seems like they're very eager to push this point. It comes across like they're excited that they have an excuse to keep their bad habits.
I'm not here preaching eat meat every day, drink milk every day, but I do say that, hey, those things are nice.
Did the paper give any specification on what a small allowance actually is? Is it a ham sandwich daily or a porterhouse steak monthly? Ambiguity is not your friend at this moment.
Mainstream veganism has a history of appropriating traditional foods.
Veganism has a habit of appropriating traditional foods. Have you ever been to a Chinese takeaway? You think that every day they're opening a fortune cookie. Also, I've never seen a samosa labelled New Vegan Hot Pocket. Amazingly, like everyone else, we call them samosas. Stop putting words in people's mouths. Plus, what's wrong with having a varied taste for food? I'm from the UK. Have you ever had English food? It's bland as hell. We love curry in this country, so much so that chip shops have a type of curry sauce that seems to be unique to them, but nobody that I'm aware of calls chip shop curry cultural appropriation. Speaking of chip shops, our national dish is fish and chips, but the potato is from South America. Is that cultural appropriation? I hate the term, but it is a snowflake-esque excuse as to why veganism is offensive, and therefore you can continue paying for innocents to be mistreated and murdered. And before anyone says anything about me not knowing what I'm talking about, I used to work in the industry. It's literally hell for these animals. Some vegans liking a samosa is not an excuse for carrying on an inhumane and unnecessary practice.
There's a whole tradition of Eastern religions who have been practicing nonviolence and not eating animals and animal products for centuries. But when you think of mainstream veganism, you often think of white people.
So you freely admit to stereotyping a subsection of the population. I know many vegans who aren't white, both personally and through seeing their content online. Why is this a race issue at all? Just because a religion preaches not using animal products before the word veganism was coined does not make it cultural appropriation. It just means we have something in common. Pythagoras seems to have been a vegan. Leo Tolstoy, Leonardo da Vinci, the list goes on. Also, I can turn that argument on its head somewhat. Confucius said that tradition is more important than the life of an animal. I'm paraphrasing slightly, please forgive me. So aren't the people that claim that our tradition of eating meat for generations is culturally appropriating Confucianism? Stop with the stupid excuses. This just proves they have no argument, they're just too lazy or just don't want to stop eating meat.
the demand for these certain foods like quinoa, now everyone wants them, and people in Peru and Bolivia, where quinoa is traditionally grown, have sometimes not even been able to afford it.
Vegans alone do not eat all the quinoa in the world.
Around 1.3 billion people depend in some way on raising animals for their livelihood.
If indigenous people rely on meat and cannot survive any other way, then by all means, do not starve yourself to death. Vegans do not believe that this justifies millions of factory farmed animals being raised purely for meat consumption, or, to put it another way, to be created for nothing other than sensory pleasure. We have the ability to grow enough food to feed us all without the use of animals. In fact, meat production limits our ability to feed the world on one level. Let's not get into politics here.
You have traditional nomadic tribes that still exist. They rely heavily on their cattle for dairy and for meat, but also that is their source of livelihood, so they love and care for those animals.
Loving and caring are not words I would use. They need them to stay alive and fit for purpose. Perhaps this does involve some level of feeling towards them, but at the end of the day, they're products, not friends. Again, this does not provide justification for you with the ability to watch this video from the comfort of your own home, more than likely within cycling distance of a supermarket, to eat animals.
Resource for them.
The majority of America can afford a Big Mac more than they can afford just basic salad ingredients.
If we can't address that, then I don't think there's any more to address.
This gets into food justice.
The food affordability is a systemic problem in the West, especially in the US. Food subsidies keep animal products artificially low in comparison to veggies, which don't get a look in. Trying to guilt vegans into believing that they're trying to force people into a lifestyle they cannot afford is just untrue. The cheapest foods in the world are whole plant foods, legumes, grains, potatoes, etc. The idea that it is inaccessible due to price restrictions is a fallacy. Even when I ate meat, I knew that a 25 kilo sack of potatoes for £8 was a better spend than a 500 gram block of Cathedral City cheese for £2.50. I mean, if you lived on Beyond Burgers and Ben & Jerry's vegan ice cream, maybe I'd agree it's expensive, but that's just not what anyone should be eating. Shop smart and you'll be fine.
Let's say someone just reduced by 50% their meat intake, but at the same time changed other things. By 50% changed the amount of driving they do, and by 50% reduced the amount of flying they do. One might say that they've done more.
They end this with this attempt to justify eating meat, but reducing it by saying reduce meat consumption by 50% and fossil fuel consumption by 50%, and that by doing this, you might not be vegan, but you may have done more for the planet without even presenting any real evidence. This is flawed logic, though. It's simply an excuse to carry on with bad habits, as reducing your reliance on fossil fuels may not be that easy depending on where you live and work. If you live in a village in the middle of nowhere, you may need to get to work in town. There might not be any buses or a train. There's many caveats to this. But eating no animal products takes no effort whatsoever if you're in a position to consider using your car less. Yes, a reduction in meat consumption by half will save half of the animals, half of the pollution, and cut your health issues that come along with eating them. But you are still killing half the animals. You're still producing more emissions than you need to, and you're still at risk for illness. Finally, person to person, 50% can be vastly different. Cutting them out completely ensures we are all doing our best.
I am moderately consuming things in an appropriate way. That's a lot for a button. It's a lot easier just to put vegan.
Moderately consuming things in an appropriate way. Who said that consuming any amount of meat was appropriate?
Yeah, to be vegan. Maybe the better thing would be to just kind of be more chill about your veganism.
Be more chill about my veganism. Be more chill about your justifications for continuing a practice you clearly know is wrong, but desperately want to sweep aside.
And there are chill vegans.
And, of course there are chill vegans, but there are total douchebags out there, just like there are total douchebags out there who are me.
I agree on that last point. So, yeah, from what I can see, they're just trying to pander to the crybaby, I don't want to stop eating meat crowd who realise the destruction it's causing, but are far too up their own ass to admit what they're doing is wrong, or want to bring vegans down by making ridiculous anecdotal claims which someone can turn and run with to lord around, singing how they're actually better than vegans because they don't fly on planes or don't buy imported quinoa, without realising the ridiculous amounts of imported grains that are fed to the dead body on their plate. Plus, it really bothers me that they have the gall to tell me to chill about my veganism. Yeah, dude, be chill about your veganism. Go back to working on those chicken farms. You only have to harass half the birds, only throw half as many in half as many crates on half as many trucks, and send half as many to the slaughterhouse. You'll only have to snap the necks of half as many sick, lame, or diseased birds. Don't feel bad that there's still billions of unnecessary deaths, but you don't have to feel bad because we, the consumer, have given ourselves a pat on the back for going to KFC half as much as we used to. Give me a frigging break, you up your own ass privileged wannabe pseudo-scientist. Half this stuff was disingenuous, the rest was plain wrong.
But we're all hypocrites.